watching as you all made your way into this room, and people who know each other very intimately but have never ever seen each other in person greet each other with such warmth. It was very, very touching, and I'm so glad we get to do this. We gather once a year to connect in exactly that way. And we're not just here to connect, but also to uplift each other. So that is our purpose of coming together, and we hope that we get to do that with all of you. So I'm just going to introduce our agenda, our schedule for today, and share a few words before we start. Most of you know that Upbuild was started in a monastery, but maybe not everybody knows that. So our partners here, Hari Prasad and Rasanath, were monks in the Lower East Side, and their monastic purpose was to realize who they really are, the real self, underneath layers and layers of ego. And they both spent 5 years in a monastery to try to discover who the real self is. And Upbuild is an extension of that monastic purpose. So what we are here, what we've been doing for 12 years, 14 years, is to do exactly that, to help other people, to keep doing that work ourselves, and to help other people do that same work, to discover who we really are underneath layers and layers of ego through which we normally see the world. So tonight, our hope is to get a little bit closer. We have the title of our evening is The Corridor to Spirituality. And with the last couple of days, our team was meeting in person. We got together and had our own mini retreat for the last couple of days. And we started each day with some reading and talk around sacred texts. And so I wanted to share a little snippet of what we talked about yesterday, because I think it's highly relevant to what we're going to do this evening. So Hari Prasad actually shared a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a sacred text in the Vedic tradition. And I'm not going to read the entire translation or the commentary on it, but I'm going to just share a snippet of this verse. And so the verse, the summary of part of the verse is that persons too addicted to material life repeatedly chew that which has already been chewed. Their inclinations toward spiritual life are never aroused. So, people too addicted to material life repeatedly chew that which has already been chewed. Their inclinations toward spiritual life are never aroused. Can you imagine what it's like to chew something that's already been chewed? It's very evocative, that line. So you can think about whether it's a piece of gum or it's that you hand to somebody else to chew after you've sucked all the juice out of it, or it's a piece of ginger from your tea that's like there's nothing left and it's just you're chewing it. And what this verse is referring to is how this is what our lives are like. We keep trying to extract some satisfaction or meaning out of the same things that we're doing over and over again that are not giving us necessarily that satisfaction or that meaning. And so he's inviting us to arouse the inclination towards discovering the spirit, the soul. And so tonight, our purpose is to try to arouse that inclination in all of us. A little bit of arousing the inclination towards something beyond our material life, which is how we spend most of our time every day. And we are going to start with a talk, an interview. Michael will be interviewing Hari Prasad and Rasanath about their monastic journey and what did they discover about the self and spiritual life. Then we will do a little kirtan together, which is a type of musical meditation that we will share. And we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A, and then we will serve dinner around 8:30 p.m. So, and then we'll have a couple of hours to just spend time together. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Michael.
Thank you, Vipin, and it's great to see everyone. I'm just so happy to see everyone. You've all come, well, some of you have come from very close, and some of you actually got on a plane to get here, which is pretty incredible. So regardless of which bucket you fit in, to thank you for coming. Thank you for making this community what it is. It's very special for all of us, and I know for all of you as well. So, and thank you, Vipin, for that opening, that very provocative opening. It's a great way to set the scene here. And I have here Hari Prasad and Rasanath, and you both have been studying the ego and studying the self for many years. You're former monks, so you spent the better part of your life doing that. So I think there's no better people to have this conversation with than the two of you. And we can get this party started by sharing some personal anecdotes and your inspiration. I would love, maybe Hari, you can get us started by sharing what is it that drove you to the monastery in the first place, and in the process, what did you learn about the ego?
Thank you, Michael. Yes. By the way, 16 years now. 16 years. 2008 was the time that I became a full-time monk, and Rasanath and I had started the work of built within the monastery walls. What drove me to the monastery was that I was feeling some kind of a calling, and I know Rasanath had a really similar experience, quite a mystically similar experience, and around a similar time frame as well, where I was feeling called to make something of myself in the world, establish my identity as somebody great, who did great things. I always feel really embarrassed when I say this. I wanted to see my name in lights. So I was on the film track, and I was not too far from here. I was just telling somebody that I dormed at Carlisle Court in Union Square at NYU. So I was right here in this neighborhood, and I wanted to make a major splash. But what was my message going to be? Because I also had to have something to say. It's no good to just be speaking without something to say, or putting things out there without any value to it. And I was always fancying myself to be a philosopher, though I had not really read any philosophy. That shows you the kind of person that I was. Yes, I'm a philosopher. You can come to me. Yes. Do I know anything? Yes, believe me. So I was actually wanting to be more authentic and wanting to be deeper and more genuine in my philosophical pursuits. And it took me to the work of Soren Kierkegaard in an existentialism and phenomenology class that I took my senior year. And so this was interesting because I had my friends who were telling me, you fulfilled all of your gen ed requirements. You don't have to take an elective course that has nothing to do with filmmaking. And I was like, yeah, but I also want to learn. So there was something in me, there was some sincerity that I was seeking something. And I was hoping that philosophy would give me more of a grasp on what I was seeking. And I was finding myself to be alone in that. And I read this book by Soren Kierkegaard, which was the first book in the curriculum. And it was called The Sickness Unto Death. And I just had a crazy experience unlike I'd ever had before, which was that I was arguing with the author. I was arguing with the founding father of existentialism, Soren Kierkegaard. And you can see the book. I still have like the arguments in the sidebar, and I was like mocking him. Who do you think you are? And then by the end of the book, I realized he was right. And I was wrong about everything. And so for 4 days straight, I couldn't get this book out of my mind. And I had had favorite books before, Catcher in the Rye, Lord of the Flies. Those were two of my all-time favorites. But nothing had waged this kind of impact on me. It was crazy. I would go to the bathroom, I'd be thinking of Kierkegaard. You know, it was like that. And he was telling me, you are in despair. You are in despair. And I thought, no, I'm not. I am very happy, thank you very much. And by the way, you don't know me, so how can you say that? Who do you think you are, once again? But by the end of it, this dramatic shift was, I think he's right, but I don't understand exactly how. And there was something that he presented, which I think about all the time and often like to reference, which was an equation that shows what is at the heart of despair. And that is a dynamic tension that lives within all of us, without exception. The tension between finitude and infinitude, or he sometimes calls it necessity versus possibility. So we all have unlimited desires, and we seek to fulfill our potential limitlessly. We're never feeling like, okay, I've arrived, that's it, now I'm good, done. It never happens. There's always something more. And then we die. So that is a problem. Finitude smacks us in the face. Necessity. There's only, every day I'm foreclosing on countless, infinite opportunities. By being here today, right now, we are foreclosing on so many unlimited possibilities. But we have all of these desires, and I was starting to reflect and see how this was true of me, and that I actually wasn't happy about it. And I thought I was happier than I was. And he would say, the most treasured place for despair to reside is in the heart of happiness. The most treasured place for despair to reside is in the heart of happiness. In other words, that's how we can really, it's kind of insidious. That despair can live in all of the distractions, all of the escape, all of the pleasures that we seek, all of the stimulation, even all of the connection. But then the emptiness still follows us. And I just became more and more attuned to this. I didn't want to see it, but I couldn't not see it because I wanted to be authentic. So I came to a Bhagavad Gita class that was part of, it was the aftermath of the vegetarian cooking club. I was a vegetarian, I was interested in cooking, and there were monks who were running this vegetarian cooking club, and they held a Bhagavad Gita class, and I started to see the connections between what Kierkegaard was saying and what the sacred text that has been studied in every major university around the world, and that comes from ancient India, the Bhagavad Gita. I was seeing how much they are really saying the same thing. And what are they saying is, you're not who you think you are. You think you're something that you're not, and that is the cause of your despair. The only way to get out of this predicament and to resolve that dynamic tension, the equation that Kierkegaard laid out between possibility and necessity, or infinitude and finitude, is by realizing who you are, being established in the self, and removing all the layers of ego of who we think we should be. So that became something that took on a life of its own, and the monks became the most attractive force in the world to me, because they were showing me how it's possible to realize the self by their own example and by their teachings. And by reading and studying more the sacred texts and learning from those who are very advanced on the path, like my guru and Rasanat's guru, Radhanath Swami, Rasanat's guru, Sachinanda Swami is my guru. Many of you have met them or seen them. That really got me committed to want to be a monk and to take this to its end, to really see, like, I have this window in my life where I'm never going to get this again, where I can just full time dive in to understanding what is the ego, what is the self, and moving from one area to the other. And been doing it ever since, and I can't stop. It's been so rich and something which we've craved to share.
Thank you, Hari. So to anchor a few of the things that you shared, there's a desire that all of us have in us for infinitude, but infinity is actually impossible in our current way of seeing the world. And so because of that, we feel this feeling of despair, but we distract ourselves with lots of happiness or pursuits, and most of us are not actually paying attention to that despair. And what we need to do is realize who we are underneath who we think we are. Rasma.
Not quite, I don't know how to follow that. But I kind of did, because Hari joined the monastery first, and I just followed him. For me, the despair was I felt it very early in life. Everything was fine at home. I didn't have any kind of trauma, capital T, or anything like that. Death and dying was very, very present in my consciousness. And I realized that everything in this world is a short life. And as someone who grew up very ambitious and wanting to make a name for myself, we should share something. I also realized that it played out that way in my life too, that I get to it and it just evaporates. It was more exciting pursuing it than actually getting it. Then getting it just evaporated. And then sometimes the suffering that I went through to get it was pretty painful too, and then not getting it was even more painful. So like the whole path was just strewn with some sort of suffering, and I didn't know how to make sense of it. I asked my mother, and she told me, finish my education, get a job, and get married. She said everything would be fine. Generally said it. That was out of full affection. But I couldn't accept that. And I didn't know what else to do with myself. So it was a time of searching to find answers. And that's when I came across the Bhagavad Gita. And idea that, well, you're not who you think you are. And that fundamentally creates an existential crisis. And then that was just like, wow, so then I want to know who I am, really. That's really the starts. The tension between what is infinite and what is finite is the root of it all. Because I felt this compulsion to live my best life, to maximize my potential. And even when I realized that pursuit of success brought with it its own set of despair, I could not pursue it. So there was this push to do big things, to even live forever. And yet there was this other side, which was the other part of that reality, which was that everything has a shelf life. So how, I couldn't reconcile. And they lived in me. And the Gita was the only book, and the first book that I encountered that actually reconciled this, that the true self has infinite potential. But when it identifies itself with something that is temporary, then everything just collapses. And so this was my gateway to my spiritual life.
And before we move on from that, you need to share a little bit about your pursuit of Wall Street, how that fits into the picture.
As an 8th grader, I saw the movie Wall Street, and it just made an immediate impact on my, young impressionable mind growing up in India. That somehow Charlie Sheen with 2 phones in his ears and with a notepad just seemed to convey to me that this is where all the action is. I mean, I have no other way to translate it but that. And yes, that's maximizing potential. That was such a strong impression. And yeah, I also wanted to own a yellow convertible and a blue motorboat. And I knew what colors I wanted. And the excitement was not the owning of it. The excitement was knowing that other people have seen me in it.
I asked you to share more about that because the way that I came to Upbuild was through an event called Have Dinner with an Investment Banker Turned Monk. These guys wanted their names in lights. I also wanted my name in lights. I was an investment banker, and here was my chance to become an investment banker turned monk. And so what these guys were selling, I was buying. So from here, maybe you could share a little bit more about how do we differentiate between the ego and the self? Because these concepts are not always crystal clear. It might be easy to talk about on the surface, but when we really get into it, how do we know the difference?
So we're all constantly trying to validate an image that we have of ourselves. Familiar? We all want to show up as a good person, a caring person, a successful person, a peaceful person. And if you're familiar with the Enneagram, you can substitute any of these for the 9 personality types of the Enneagram. So everyone, according to their personality, has a whole construct of what kind of person I am and how I need to see myself in this life. Because if I don't, big problem, crisis, right? So I always have to be pushing hard on, yes, I am this. And if anything in this world gives me a different sense about myself, I am really, really upset. So the ego is that which is driving us in that direction, to project, to prove to ourselves, I am who I think I should be. I know I'm supposed to be this. I'm going to prove it to myself once and for all, because I am this. Damn it. And if anybody makes me feel contrary, whether they intend to or not, if anybody didn't quite validate exactly as I wanted the image that I have of myself, or they made me question it a little bit, the defenses go up. And most of the time, this is unconscious, which is a much bigger problem, because then I can't do anything about it. So it's in the recesses of our mind. And then occasionally we get a tiny glimpse in the subconscious, and every once in a while we become conscious of it. And as we do this work, we become more and more conscious. We reduce the incredible crater of the unconscious. We bring it into the subconscious more to make it more conscious. And that's when we can start to move towards the self, because otherwise we don't even know the game we're playing. So why would we go to a self? We don't even believe there is such a self. It's a veritable myth. No, this is me, and I like it or I don't like it, and you like it or you don't like it. But the self is something else, and we have to see the game that the ego is playing of always needing to prove something. Always. It never takes a break. When we dream, the ego is still trying to prove something. It's trying to get something or avoid something. It happens 24/7. That's the ego. But the self is something else. It is beyond the purview of the ego. It is something which actually has its own intrinsic worth that is not dependent on any circumstance of this world. We are always the self beneath all of that. And so when we start to see the game that the ego is playing, we can start to pursue something else. And that is the corridor to spirituality. Seeing how the life of the ego doesn't work. It's always leaving us wanting. I need more. I need more. I need more. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if this happens? Everything dependent on temporary circumstances, right? And then, again, we die, which is not what any of us want unless our ego has pulverized us so much that we're in a desperate state where death appears more attractive than life. But that's not natural to any person. That has nothing to do with the self. The self always wants to live on and always wants to experience its value. Always wants to feel like I'm good. And the truth is, the self is good. That's why we have that bent in us, because it's a refraction of what is real. This is the craziness. It's like when you put something, a light through a prism, it's tinted by the color of the prism. So the self is putting out light. And then the ego is that prism that is refracting it in all of these ways. But we'll never be satisfied with the refraction. We have to get to the source of that light. We have to get to the real self. And again, that is the corridor to spirituality. Recognizing the ego doesn't work. It leaves us always wanting, and determining there is something more. And there are realized souls who have achieved that identification with the self, who have taught how to get there, and who, many of them, have left this world and completely gone to the world of the real self. And there are some who are present even as they walk among us in this day and age, and they are teaching currently how to get there. And we need both. They help us distinguish, like Kierkegaard was helping me to distinguish, and like my own guru continues to help me distinguish between the ego and the self.
Thank you, Hari. And one of the reasons we had this program tonight is to actually shift our lives. It would be easy to show up tonight and have some feel-good experience. So that was a pretty interesting talk. Those guys seemed to sort of know what they were talking about. And then to just go back to life and have nothing shift. So as we're talking here, I encourage all of you to be going through your own life and be thinking, where is my ego not working? How is my ego not working? What suffering am I experiencing, and what suffering am I experiencing that I'm not allowing myself to actually experience? Because that is where so much of the juice comes from. It's where so much of the progress can start. Razana, please.
I would like to just touch upon how we resist many times living the life of the soul, or life of the true self. So the biggest thing that comes to mind as a distinguishing factor is that the ego is always wanting to control. And it is just very, very clear, which is also why we resist looking for something that's beyond the ego, because it just always wants to be the fantasy. The nature of the soul is not that. The nature of the true self is the one that doesn't want to control. It wants to serve. And to me, that is a very big distinction between the true self and the ego. Now, sometimes the ego tries to control by serving. And it can, this is how tricky this gets. I'm just doing this for you. But there is an experience of the true self. When we have experienced individuals who are living the life of the self, and I can only say that by some stroke of good fortune, despite wanting to be Charlie Sheen of this character, Wall Street, by some stroke of good fortune, like my life just intersected with individuals who they defy. You know how when somebody defies the law of gravity, it's like you suddenly look to them. It's like, this is different, and you see how these individuals who were truly living the life of self, they served, and there was no ounce of control in how they showed up consistently. And that to me was a shocking element. I had never experienced anything like that before. And for me, that was my first, and till today continues to be what draws me to understanding that the soul, the self, is different than the ego. So you see a true spirit of unconditional service versus a desire to control and manipulate. That's how I have recognized, even in me, I know when I say things and when I'm trying to control the environment. And it's a when you walk away from it, you actually don't feel good. Have you experienced that? And even when others are impressed with what you have done, when you really pay attention to it, there's something about it that just didn't feel right. Now somehow we find a way to dim that. And that's where you see, the collective conscience threshold just, we live in a society where collective conscious threshold is the new norm is very different. But when we are truly paying attention, we know when we are trying. And it's amazing. It is amazing to understand that the truth, the self, can see that that's happening. And that silent voice that says, something was just off. And that is such a powerful voice. And when we can really fan that voice, we listen to it very deeply. We are contacting the true self.
Thank you. We share in some of our workshops how what control can feel like is if I want somebody to tell me that they love me and I were to threaten them and force them to tell me that they love me and they say, I love you, Michael, what does that feel like? I get what I want on the surface, but I don't walk away satisfied. And that is the feeling of control that comes from the ego. So how do we move towards the self?
I think it begins with a desire. Over the course of my life, I've come to recognize that the root of change is a strong desire for it. And many times we look for change from a place of, well, I just want to get the result. I want to be the soul today, right now. Can you give me a pill? Right? And it doesn't work that way. Where it begins with is a strong desire. Now, we may not experience the results of living the true self, the life of the true self immediately. But that desire then brings us to three things, which our guided mentor, Satyananda Swami, constantly reminds us of. Three things. That desire brings us to the right people, the right philosophy, and the right practice. The philosophy as in how do we look at the world, the paradigm with which we look at the world. The people who encourage us, and through their own life and example, inspire us to live the life of true self. And the practice that really helps us experience the true self. And the people who practice the philosophy, the three P's, as Satyananda Swami so eloquently puts it. The three P's are key to then going closer to the life of the true self. But what we need is a strong desire. And with that desire, then when we start engaging with the people who practice philosophy, they will see slowly but surely the experience of the true self. We will see on one hand things that used to bother us. That didn't bother that. What happened? That didn't bother me. We find we start to experience strength even when we are suffering. And that strength is not just psychologically convincing myself of, yes, this is what I have to do. It's not like a pep talk. The strength starts to come from a much deeper place. We experience it. These are transformative things that we craved. We suddenly, like the other day we were talking about, was it walking on the street, and we were talking about our past, and this one person that I knew, she's actively adopted this spiritual practice, And we were walking through the Lower East Side, and she looked at a bar, and she said, "I used to hang out there." And she said, "Wow, you know, when I look at it, I don't even have a desire for it anymore." And she said, "It surprises me." It's almost like, how did I get here? But that's the effect that people practicing philosophy have. It works very silently, and we slowly but surely begin to get the experience of what living the life of the true self feels like.
All right, maybe you can bring us into the practice of the third P, practice.
So practice is critical because it's the application that we get from people and the philosophy that they embody. Without that third P of practice, it doesn't really have the effect that we want. There's still an effect for sure, and it's powerful, but it doesn't quite drive it home, and we don't experience transformation exactly. Because if we're not taking what is being given, then we can't expect a result. So practice is really key, that I am taking what is being given and I am applying it to my own life. Therefore, I'm getting takeaways, I'm internalizing, and commitment also makes this go very far. And you can't commit to things that you don't understand, and you can't commit to things that you also don't have a realistic sense of whether you'll be able to follow through on them. But as you learn more, and as you experience more conviction in the people and the philosophy and what practice they're giving, then the commitment naturally should follow. But the ego will have its own desires. We should know we are, as my Guru Satchidananda Swami says, we are divided souls. The ego is mostly in charge. And then if we want to dethrone the ego, that is quite a battle. That's an internal battle. And if we're not feeling that battle, we haven't yet started the path. When you started the path, you will know what that battle is for sure. And we all have glimpses of that. But when you're walking this path, that is a day in and day out experience until the ego is completely dethroned. Then you don't feel like you're divided anymore and there's no battle. Then that's what's called the self-realized soul. You only identify with the self, ego is gone. But practices and a foundational understanding of them and their value and how to keep making good on them, how to capitalize more and more, how to improve the quality of our practice is essential for transformation to happen. So there are many different practices from many different traditions, but there are similarities which are crucial. And the similarity is there should be an understanding of what is the real self, the soul, that undying core of us, which can be awakened through different means, and that it connects us to a higher reality, a divine reality, which we are a part of. We don't live in a vacuum. The self is not living in a vacuum. So that is really the context. And whatever practice will help you to realize the self in that context of a divine reality, that is wanted. Now, from the sacred texts of the Vedic culture, like the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, which Vipin mentioned at the outset, we get specific practices that are extraordinarily potent and which have transformed our lives more than anything we could have imagined, and continue to keep us raising our commitment and wanting to up the quality day in and day out, day in and day out. Learn more, apply more. So one such practice, which is really the core of all of our practices, is meditation. And that can be done in a personal manner, where you have meditation beads, and you're meditating on a mantra. There are different kinds of meditation, but mantra meditation is very, very powerful. It's what we do because it connects us to that divine reality and awakens the self. So you can do it personally on beads, or you can do it collectively, set to music, and both are needed. Both are needed. But today, what we get to do is to set it to music, to have an experience that hopefully will touch us in some way and get us a little glimpse of what that potency is of a mantra. And a mantra is a sound vibration that's transcendental. So if you want to wake up from sleeping, what's the best means? An alarm. And is that through a sense of smell? It's the ears pick up on it, right? So sound wakes up a sleeping person. Sound also wakes up a sleeping soul, like us. So through that sound vibration, which is transcendental, we can increasingly wake up to who we are.
When my alarm goes off, I don't always like to wake up. And I think it's very similar with the ego. But let us all hear that as a call to action, to really desire, as Rajanath said, to wake up. So just to anchor a few things. The ego is the identity of who we think we should be. It is all about control. Its chief mechanisms are proving and defending. I prove that I am this identity. I also defend that I am this identity. And when I do that, I shift down in consciousness. I lose awareness. I start controlling the people around me. And what we need to do is wake up to that, to see that more clearly, so that we can start to cultivate some of the qualities of the self. Things like tolerance, patience, love, compassion. And ultimately what we get is freedom from the ego. And it's a long path, but it's one where I think we're all here for. That's why everyone showed up tonight. So with that, we can now shift into this experience, this communal experience that we're about to have with musical meditation. So Vipin, please come back.
I think you just introduced it. Well, so we're going to put, so we'll need a few minutes to set up instruments and things, and we're going to put the mantra on the screen. And so if you need to stand up and stretch your legs, we'll just need a few minutes to set up, and then it will be Hari Prasad is going to share a bit more about the actual practice, but it will be a call and response practice. So you will be, it's participatory. So yeah, stretch your legs and come back in a few minutes and we'll get started. Okay.
Yeah.
So here we go. Take your seats. We also have a wonderful musician, Dina Bandhu, who will be on the harmonium. And he's a very dear friend and part of this community. Okay, good. So the mantra that we'll be meditating on together is called the Maha Mantra. The Maha Mantra means the great mantra. Now, mantra also has a meaning, even though it's an English word that everybody knows, but it comes from the Sanskrit. And the meaning in the Sanskrit is, so it's a compound word. It comes from manas and trayate. Manas and trayate. Manas means the mind. Have you noticed that as much as our mind makes us want to try to control other people, that whenever that is happening, it is not within our control? And have you noticed when you try to control the mind, it doesn't cooperate very easily? How many of you have a meditation practice of your own? Okay. Is it like a breeze? No. So you know that the mind doesn't just do what it's told. But the trayate part is really important here. Trayate means to deliver, to liberate, to deliver. So a mantra is that which can deliver the mind, which can make it under the control of the real self. That's a good prospect, no? This is wanted. So then, the mind is so powerful, it can take us 1,000,000 miles away in a second. Imagine we actually got it under our control of the real self. Imagine we could channel the mind completely towards our real self and the ultimate reality, and how much we could serve every other real self. That's what we stand to gain. So, Maha means great. The Maha mantra is that mantra which is especially suited for this purpose, that which is unrivaled. So it's a very, very, very powerful mantra that has been used by great sages throughout the ages and has been passed down from one teacher to another, to another, to another. There are other mantras which are extremely powerful. This is the particular mantra that we meditate on every day in and day out, with as much commitment as we possibly can. So there are 3 words in this mantra: Hare Krishna and Rama. Hare Krishna and Rama. And each one is a divine name. So again, it's getting us in touch with a reality that is mystical, that is much higher than what our senses perceive. And over time, more and more that comes into focus. But what's nice, if you've never done this before, is there can be also a stark contrast between what we're used to. Sometimes that's foreign and sometimes it's challenging. But many times, and these are not mutually exclusive, many times it's exciting because it's so different that it gives me a sense of what are the possibilities here. And so let's look out for that. Let's not be worried if it's foreign. That's normal. Okay, no problem. It was foreign for me also. And now we can be really entering into a different state of consciousness. So, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. You can all just give it a shot together. I'll say it once more, and then you can respond. And let's just be aware of the sanctity of this mantra as we say it, okay? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. One more time. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Excellent, excellent. So before we begin setting us to music and having our kirtan, which will be led by Rasana, we can close our eyes and enter into a very different state of consciousness, welcoming a different state of consciousness by already positioning ourselves. And let our meditation be to receive something that we're not accustomed to receiving. That even if we have received something of this, we know there's so much more to be gained. And now, as we're all together, and as we all sing from our hearts, we can achieve something by the strength of each other's voices, by the sanctity that we each create together through our sincerity, through our participation. There's something we just cannot get on our own. Let's be receptive. Let us welcome that. It's a divine gift. And let's take it with us into our lives.
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Hari Gaur Hare Krishna Hare Hare
conversation from earlier, or from the kirtan that we just did, or anything on your minds related to the corridor to spirituality. So please, we'll have maybe 10 minutes or so, and then we'll have dinner. Yeah, please. You could share your name.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Scott McAllister. I'm very curious what the daily life was like in the ashram.
Soon to be followed with a podcast on. So, that is interviewing us on life in the monastery. Maybe we said more podcasts. But thanks, Seth, what you said.
It was a very rigorous program of spiritual practice with philosophy and people. So we would begin before dawn. The idea is to start the day before the day catches on. To be really in the best state of mind means you start in the early morning hours, really with a pure intention and a desire to make the most of the day, especially with spiritual practice. So we would be down in the temple room of our monastery by 5 a.m. That was the cutoff time. So we could come earlier if we wanted, but we couldn't come later than 5 a.m. And then we would do this same mantra meditation, but with beads, our personal practice, which is the biggest commitment that we have to this day. And that would be till 6:15. And then we would do kirtan like we just did with the Mahamantra as well as other mantras, and bhajans or poetry, spiritual poetry. And we would sing and dance, and we would start every single day, 365 days a year, that same way. And it was glorious. I mean, wow, it was quite a shot in the arm spiritually. And even materially speaking, I think you can imagine rising early and having that kind of intentionality, and then being celebratory and singing and dancing every morning, and also doing meditation, which helps to clear the mind even on the material level. It's super, super powerful and has a cumulative effect. So that was the basis of what we did, and then everything else would come after, where we'd have different services that we each went out and did. Sometimes different services on different days. Like I was distributing spiritual books, and I was getting massive rejections right here in Union Square. And that was humbling as anything I've ever done. It prepared me for today. I kid you not, I would not be here without that experience, voluntarily signing up for rejection, because of two things. One, I wanted to share something which was invaluable beyond words, that I knew every single soul can benefit from immeasurably. And two, because I wanted to get rid of my ego, and that was a highly efficient way of doing it. I learned a lot, and I had many mystical experiences as well in that. Some I've written about. So that was one of my services. Upbuild was the other one, and we all took turns cooking and cleaning for each other, some more than others according to their nature and their inclination. And we had a lot of what we would call sangha, the Sanskrit word for connection, like we're having right now. We would just speak together one-on-one collectively. We'd have a lot of classes. The different monks would take turns giving each other classes. We'd have special guests who were, in many cases, amazing, like our gurus would come and give classes and train us. And we would try to go to sleep early. I was a little bit bad at that, and I'm still suffering from it. Early to bed, early to rise makes one healthy, wealthy, and wise. I'm still trying to realize that one. I realize, but I haven't fully internalized. So then we would do it all over again, and we had all kinds of different special events and festivals that we would put on for the service of others, and teaching the Bhagavad Gita, teaching whatever we were learning that understood could benefit the soul of anybody.
One of the most ceremonious parts of the monastic life was breakfast and lunch. And it was a real ceremony. Everybody sat to 2 rows, and it was such it was a very joyous celebration. And then we had 2 people who would cook, especially lunch. Lunch cooking would be pretty elaborate. So the monks, we didn't suffer. The spirit that it carried was, a spirit of, coming together and even eating. So many times we put food in our mouth. It can either be mechanical or it can be so, all that we're looking for is some sort of gratification. But the experience of eating in the monastery was a spiritual experience. The food was cooked in a particular way. It was offered from the heart in a particular way. And it was served in a particular way. And the people who were serving had a culture where the idea was, some items are, prized. They're very tasty. Some cooks were marked. They made certain things that were really good. And sometimes you used to run out. But the idea of service was you serve from your heart. So when somebody asks, otherwise the tendency is, how much is left? And will I get? The idea of the practice was to give selflessly, as selflessly as we could. Because then practically we also made arrangements where the people who served would get their plates made first. So that way they feel secure. And then, when you have security, you can just you can serve from your heart. Otherwise you're looking at how much is left, becoming scratchy. So, that was a beautiful experience. And cooking was also an amazing experience. I used to cook, and I used to manage. Management was another experience where you could really get your ego smashed. You think you're managing everything. It was hard. It was hard managing. Very. I wouldn't be here, as Hari Prasad said. Same thing.
Yeah, Peter.
Hi guys. I'm curious to know if you still wake up at 4:30 in the morning, and if you don't, what time do you wake up, and how do you bring the life that you had in the ashram into your civilian life?
Yeah, thank you. So I have a fixed habit that gets thrown off of waking up at 5 in the morning. And that is relatively recent. My wife has been an inspiration for the particular timing. I was waking up at 4 in the morning, but that was quite challenging with the responsibilities of the present. And 5 o'clock has worked very well for me when I don't have COVID and when I am not traveling all over the place, and when there are not programs that keep me up very late at night. But otherwise, 5 in the morning I found to be exceedingly helpful, and for the regulation, it helps ease the mind, and it helps you take advantage of the day in the same way as before. And I begin with my meditation practice on the Maha Mantra, my personal practice with beads called japa, and that sets the foundation of my day. And I do a lot of spiritual reading, just as I was doing then, although I had more time then. But at least with our work, it's all inspired by the sacred texts and the teachings of great souls who have impacted us tremendously. And so there's always contact with that, and always meditation on the sacred text, the teachers and the teachings, and the amazing opportunity to try to share that, which inspires me like anything, and yeah, helps me advance spiritually.
My older one, Mila, she hates to sleep, and I try putting her to sleep at night. So it's quite, I can't go to bed before 11 because she won't. And so I try to wake up between 6 and 6:15 every morning and get 7 hours. And the first thing I start with is my meditation practice. Try to do all of them once every 2 hours before she wakes up. And then I have my own personal spiritual reading at night after she goes to sleep. And then sometime during the middle of the day when I get some time here and there, I try to listen to, even if it's for 5 minutes between 2 coaching sessions. I just have a bunch of YouTube lectures by my guru on, and then I just play. And there's something about the instructions, just listening to the voice, listening to the content that just picks you up from what you have been, the layer of our regular material life that just like settles, just like lifted. And that's a breath of fresh air. That was inspired by my personal coaching with Hari Prasad. He really encouraged me to do it, which I've been trying to follow. And I would consider, as Hari Prasad also said, like if we're very fortunate, we look at what we are doing as an act of service to our teachers, really. And make up very consciously, at the end of the day, I try to offer in my heart everything that I did today as an offering to my teacher, who has very kindly intervened in my Wall Street life. And eating, again, the same practice. We cook at home, and we offer it to the divine from our heart, and we partake of eating. So eating is a spiritual activity as well.
Yeah, we try to keep our monastic lives with us. That's the key, is not to diverge apart, but to really take the same practices and just tailor them to where we are at present, which is not easy, but it is very, very fulfilling, and it works. It really works. So I have also taken on, in addition to a lot of prayer, which Rasanath touched upon, which spiritualizes everything and changes my consciousness in anything that I would be doing. I also take regular time, inspired by Satchidananda Swami, to retreat. I wrote a piece in 2018 called The Challenge of Solitude, a takeaway for 2018, about this necessity to retreat, and that will look different for different people, but for me, that has been critical, and the more I do that, the better. The less I do that, the more I feel I'm being swept away from where I really am craving.
I just wanted to say that I'm beginning to recognize how raising kids and taking care of my parents is an act of offering as well. It's very challenging sometimes, and you have to learn how to connect with them as souls. And as soon as you lose that perspective, it's a very different interaction. And even that perspective is very alive. It's a very different, and that's a constant reminder that even the people that you're living with, you call family, you don't own them. You can't control. You have to serve.
have time for more questions. Maybe one more question we have. And then we have more time afterwards to ask anything.
Jillian,
Oh, yeah. I'm curious if you can remember back at the beginning of your journey, or for us laymen here, when the self and the ego, and it's such a fine line, or maybe it's not a fine line, right? Rosanath, you said, when sometimes you walk away from a conversation, you feel in your stomach it didn't feel good, right? Or like when you put a drop of something in water and you can see it's contaminated. What's something, and I'm sure it's different for everybody, but for you or in general, what's a gut check? How can we pressure test ourselves in that moment without getting that little feeling afterward of got that sucked, but how can we check ourselves, really?
I think the first thing that's important, we have to develop the capacity to check ourselves. The ego just doesn't know what that is. The ego wants to be unchecked. That's its mission. And so the capacity to check yourself only comes when the voice of the true self grows. Which means when you hear that the first time, it's so important to fan it. It's so important because it's so easy for the ego to step in and justify it. Say, that person deserved it. Or I was tired. And it requires explicit honesty to just own our part. Which is the voice of the soul. And we have to listen to it and let it grow. It's such an opportunity, otherwise we just done it. And the more we listen to that voice, the more we then act on the voice. So the first way of acting might be to actually go back and say, without saying, well, I was really tired. Say, I should have done that. Right? And you know what happens there? It's like you feel the pit in your stomach. That's the ego dissolving a little bit. That's the beginning of humility, which is the true existence of the self. And then that is done enough number of times, then you'll see, as you're doing it, you can catch yourself. It's like, okay, I know what this is. It's very familiar. The voice of the true self grows. Now you can recognize it as it's happening and learn to take responsibility as it's happening. And then it moves to before it happens. You know exactly how this is going. You don't succumb to it.
Rosalind, before we move to dinner, will you share something about Satya and
Yes. So today's thank you for saying this. Today's dinner is being cooked by someone who I've known for a very long time. Since my coming to the US, I've known her. She has been a lifelong practitioner of spiritual life, especially the path of bhakti that Hari Prasad and I have practiced. And she's an extremely gifted cook. And she lives in Brooklyn in an apartment building. And she used to run a restaurant before, single-handedly. I mean, if you see her in the kitchen, it's like she's in charge, you can see, and she knows exactly what she's doing. And today she's very kindly cooked an entire feast for us. I think it's about 6 or 7 courses. And she transported it. So her name is Satya. I just wanted to honor her for her devotion and her lifelong dedication and devotion.
So I hope that you all experienced something different in the kirtan, and whether it was your first time or you've done it many times, that you were able to lose yourself, lose your false self, not your real self, a little bit. Thank you for being so attentive. We're going to have dinner. It's going to be served back there, and then we're stay as long as you want. I think we have this place till 11. Meet other people. Come talk to us. We want to spend time with every single one of you. So don't be in a hurry to leave. And thank you again for being here. So, and please. Oh yeah, sorry. I had one other responsibility which I failed to do. Actually, I think this is my really only responsibility, and I failed to do it. So just sharing a couple of programs that we do at Uphill that you may be interested in. We would be very interested in you being part of these programs. So the first is remembering who we are. This is it's a weekly program every Wednesday it was really started as our internal team's spiritual start. We would do when we gather as a team, we would come together, just like I was describing this verse, chewing what's already been chewed, and this is the kind of thing that we would do in our spiritual starts, where we take some excerpt or some quote or some verse, and then talk about how it is relevant to our lives. And so when COVID started, 2020, right? It seems like it's forever. So we started opening up our spiritual start to the community. And so we do this every Wednesday at lunchtime. It's a free program. You can come whenever you can make it, but it's a little bit like the conversation you witnessed here earlier, and it's interactive, and you break up into groups. You get a partner and you do some one-on-one time, and then we're having a discussion. So we'd love for you to join if you feel inspired any Wednesday at 12 o'clock. You can register on our homepage and then join us.
The whole basis of that is intervention in our regular lives. It's right in the middle of Wednesday. And to remind us that we are actually the true self. That's the single desire of that program. And when we come together in community, it's important for us to hear and be reminded of this. That's the single desire for the program.
Yeah, the title is Remembering Who We Are, remembering that we are spirit souls. And it is an oasis in the middle of our week. So love to have you for that. Then we have the Enneagram is a personality typology that is a framework that we use a lot in our work. We find it is extremely helpful in understanding the ego, so that then we can better understand what we're trying to transcend. And so at the Enneagram workshop, we do this once a year. That's open to the public, and it's happening in October. It's on a weekend from 10 a.m. to 2:30 Eastern Time, Saturday and Sunday. So if you have not encountered the Enneagram, we would love for you to join us. And if you have, Krista and I were talking earlier about how much she was sharing how much the Enneagram has impacted her. She was introduced to, we did a workshop with her organization maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and she's still getting so much out of it. So if you can, even if you've encountered the Enneagram, come join us again, because I've been through this workshop maybe 15, 20 times, and I still get more out of it each time I go through it. So, and then we have a workshop on coaching. The majority of our days are spent coaching, one-on-one coaching executives, founders, anyone who's interested in working on themselves. And this is a one-day workshop, coaching skills for work and life, where we take everything that we've learned about coaching over the last 14 years, 16 years, and try to encapsulate it in a one-day workshop that you can immediately put to work the next day. And then our podcast has many conversations about the self and the ego and how to distinguish between the two. So you can find that at upbuild.com/podcast. And yeah, we want to see you again. We want to see you regularly, even if we can't do it always in person. All of this is all online, and so no matter where you are, you can join us. And now,